Hi, welcome to this beginner-friendly Blender animation tutorial. Today I'll guide you step by step to create this stunning pill bottle animation. You need no prior experience with Blender to follow along. We'll start with a blank 3D scene and do modeling, texturing, animating and rendering this scene. By the end, you'll not only have created something amazing, but also learned elementary skills to build upon. Before we begin, I recommend watching my Blender interface introduction tutorial if you're new to Blender. I've also recorded a supplementary video for the pill bottle tutorial where I separately cover most of the operations and tools used in this tutorial, which could benefit you if you're new to Blender. Go ahead and download the latest Blender 4.2 LTS. All the links are in the description below. If you're ready, let's go. We're starting with an empty scene. The most important thing when working on larger projects is to stay organized, so name your collections accordingly. I know which collections I need, so I will name them first. Box, bottle, pill, scene, camera. You will see which keys I'm pressing here on the left. Press 1 on the numpad to go into the orthographic front view. First we will model the box, so select the box here. Before adding anything else, I will add a background image which I will use as a reference. Hit Shift A, Image, Background. Find the folder where you exported the reference images and image textures and choose the file named box. The image is not centered, so right now, from the front view, we want to center the front of the box. Select the image, press G, X, and then slide it to the right. Place it approximately and we will fine-tune it later. Press GZ and pull the image up so that the bottom is at the scene origin point, or where the Z-axis is 0. With the box collection selected, hit Shift A, Mesh, and add in a cube. Press GZ1, which places the bottom of this cube at the origin point. Press N to pull out the side menu, go to Item, and here you can see the location, rotation, the scale, and dimensions of our cube. Next I want to rename the cube, double click on it and write box. Something we should have already done. Go to File, Save As, and name your file. Modeling box plus bottle. Make sure you save often and save in different versions so that you can always go back if you find a mistake, or if you wish to change something later on. By holding down scroll and moving the mouse around, you can rotate around the object. Right now we are in object mode and the viewport shading is set to wireframe, meaning we can see through the object. If I hit tab, I go into edit mode. In edit mode, I can see all the points or vertices of my object. Our box has 8 vertices or 8 points. If I go back to object mode, I can switch to solid view. If I select the box and hit G, we're moving the whole box. So in object mode, we move whole objects, while in edit mode, we can change the shape of the object by moving each vertice, edge, or face separately. Let's go back to front view by pressing 1 on the numpad, go into edit mode. Make sure that your transform pivot point is set to median point. By default, it should be there. Press A to select all the vertices. Right now, if I scale, it's going to scale each side proportionally or evenly. So if I hit S, scale, X on the X-axis, I scale it on the X-axis. We can see our left edge is hitting the box sooner than our right edge, and they are moving the exact same amount, meaning our background image is not centered well. The important thing now is that we will adjust the background image, not the mesh of our box. So I will press tab to go out of edit mode, select the background image, and right now it's difficult to see exactly where our box is because our background image is quite dark. What I can do now is click over here, check this opacity box, and now I can adjust the opacity of the background image. If I bring it down, we can see the shape of our box. And now I can center my background image. Once the background image is centered, select the box, press tab to go into edit mode. With all the vertices selected, scale it more on the x-axis, then press B and drag to select just the top vertices, but make sure you're in wireframe mode so that you're selecting all 4 vertices on top. If you're in solid view, you will select only the 2 which are nearest to you. GZ and bring it down. Save your file. Now I will use the same background image for my side view reference. Select the background image, Shift D, and then right click to drop it into the same place. With it still selected, press R and type in 90. Which will rotate it 90 degrees. If you hold down scroll and rotate a bit, you can see our background images are not visible in perspective view. To make the background images visible in perspective view, over here in the object data properties, check perspective. And now we can see our empty 001, which this background image is called, is visible in the perspective view. And now I can do the same thing for the front background image. Select it and check perspective. Press 3 to go into orthographic side view. If you wanted to see it from the other side, you would press Ctrl 3. 1 is front view, Ctrl 1 is back view. So after pressing 3 from side view, select the background image, hit G, Y, and then place the front of the box at the origin point. Now position the box. Select it, go into Edit View, A to select all the vertices, G, Y, and pull it back. You can double tap A to deselect all, so A is to select all, and double A is to deselect all. Alternatively, you can deselect all with Alt A. So A, select all, double A, deselect all, or Alt A to deselect all. Press B, and while in wireframe, select the 4 back vertices and position them along the Y-axis. Now the shape of our box is ready. Next, we will separate the top of the box. This will be our top panel that opens and closes. Go into edit mode and select the top face. You can either select all the 4 vertices, all the 4 edges, or just that one top face. With the top face selected in edit mode, press P. This will separate the top face. Press Tab to go out of edit mode. Now you can see we have 2 objects, box and box 001. This means the top is now a separate object. With the default viewport shading, it's difficult to see which object is which because they're the same color. While in solid view, go over here in viewport shading. Select Matcap, Object Random, and check this cavity. Now in solid view, each object will be a different color. Although we separated the top, we will connect the top back to the original object, but only at these 2 vertices. First, we will make some changes to the top. Select these 2 vertices, hit G, Y, and pull them back a little. Hit 7 on the numpad to go into top view so we see what's happening. Now I want to scale these 2 vertices on the x-axis just a bit. Make sure the pivot point is set to medium point. Scale it a bit on the x-axis, just so these 2 edges are not overlapping. Now we can join these 2 objects back together. First select the top, hold down Shift, and then select the box. Now press Ctrl J. This joins the 2 meshes back together into a single object. But if you go into edit mode now, you will see that the 2 meshes are still separate. They are one object, but the 2 meshes are not connected. If I go into wireframe now, you can see we have 2 vertices in the same location. One of the top and one of the box. I want to join them into one. A good way to check this is to go over here and select Statistics. Now I can see all the information about my selected object over here. It shows us how many vertices, edges, and faces our object has. So you see if I press B and select this area here, I have 2 vertices out of 12 selected, meaning there are 2 in this same location. With both of them selected, press M to merge and choose at center. Press B and select the location of the other two. You can see again we have two vertices in this location, and choose Add Center. Now our top is connected how we want it to be. While in edit mode, hit Ctrl R with your mouse hovering here, left click. This will add an edge loop. Double tap G and slide it over to this side. Hover your mouse here, Ctrl R, add in another edge loop, left click, double tap G and pull it to the other side, close to the edge. Now add another edge loop here with Ctrl R, left click, now press Ctrl B. This will separate this into two loop cuts, that's the bevel option, Ctrl B is bevel, and pull your mouse until these two loop cuts reach the edges really close. Now we will add 6 loop cuts to this side here. Press Ctrl R and scroll your mouse until you see 6 here, and left click. We're adding these loop cuts so we can make some changes to the geometry of the box. Now I want to make some changes to the top panel and add a flap. I will hide all of these outer faces of the box so that I can see the inside. To be able to work on this flap, I will need to hide all of these outer faces. With the select mode set to face, while holding down Shift and Alt, click on one of these edges here. This will select all the faces along this side, all the way around. Press H to hide all of these faces. Now we can see the inner parts. Select these 6 vertices, hit EZ and pull down these vertices a bit. Hit EZ once again, pull them down. Now hit SX and scale them along the X-axis a bit. Alt H to unhide everything. Now I want to make sure this flap will not go through my box. Select these vertices, hit 3 on the numpad, go into side view, hit GY and pull them in slightly. Deselect the top ones and pull the lower ones in a bit more. Now rotate the view, add another loop cut to this part of the box here, Ctrl B to bevel, pull the mouse away. If you've already left clicked and set the bevel, you can still adjust it by hitting SY and scaling this along the Y axis and getting these two loop cuts close to the edge. Select this edge, hide it, L on this part, hide this as well. Now I want to add these extra 2 side flaps on the inside, also called dust flaps. Choose Select Mode Edge, select these 2 edges, extrude, hit E, S, X, which will extrude these and scale them along the X axis. You can go into top view to see it more clearly. Scale them until they're quite close. Select these 2 vertices and pull them along the Y axis a little. Now hit Ctrl R to add some loop cuts along these flaps. Scroll up until you see 5 here and left click. Hold down Alt Shift to select all the vertices at the end of the flaps and pull them down a little. Press Alt H and this unhides everything. Go into wireframe. Now we have this top panel and flaps on the top of our box, but usually these boxes open on the top and on the bottom. We don't have to model the bottom as well, we can just copy what we made from the top. Add a loop cut here, since by default all the edge loops are placed at the middle of a face. This edge loop is placed exactly at the middle of our box. With this edge loop selected, hit Shift S and select Cursor to Selected. This will place our 3D cursor exactly at the center of our box. Go into wireframe, select all the vertices on the bottom, and X to delete. Set the pivot point to 3D cursor, Select all the vertices, Shift D to duplicate them, and hit space to get this search option. If the search option is not showing up, go into Edit, Preferences, Key Map, and make sure that spacebar action over here is set to search. In search, type mirror and select Z Global. This will mirror all of our top vertices along the Z axis. Now all of these vertices are in the same location, and this is not good. We can join them in a few different ways. I can either select these four, add in a face, then select this edge and hit F until they're all connected. But I don't want to do this. Go into Face Select, while holding down Shift and Alt to select all of these, and X to delete all these faces. Now I want to use Edge Loops, which is an add-on that if you don't have activated already, go into Edit, Preferences, Get Extensions, write in Loop here, and click Install Loop Tools. Now holding down Shift Alt, select all the vertices on the top and the bottom, right-click, Loop Tools, and choose Bridge. This will connect them perfectly. Choose Edge Select, hold down Shift Alt, select these two loop cuts, and hit X. Choose Delete Edge Loops. Now add 5 loop cuts to the top and 5 loop cuts to the bottom. Add a loop cut to the center, Ctrl B to bevel, and scale it until the loop cuts get close to the edges. Add one more loop cut here, and add another 7 loop cuts here. Save your file. Now we will adjust the geometry of our box a little. In edit mode, start by selecting this edge here and press H to hide it. Same on the bottom, H to hide, press L while hovering here, H to hide. Make sure you have this top selected with L, also H to hide. Now Shift Alt and select all of these vertices here and on the bottom and H to hide. Now we isolated just the middle body of our box. These boxes are not connected here. Hold down Shift Alt and select this edge here, V, to separate these two edges. Right click to snap it back into place, and tap double G to slide it back a little. Now you see if I try to zoom into this point here, I get some clipping. I get too close to these vertices and they disappear. To fix this, go into View over here and add in a 0 so that this clip start is set to 0.001. Select this edge and tap the dot on your numpad. Now I'm zoomed in really close without any clipping. Select this edge and extrude it in. Extrude again, pull it in a bit, and scale a little along the Z-axis. If we check from the inside, now our flap is hitting this new edge of the box, so select these vertices here and pull it in a bit more. Now our geometry is more or less ready. Now I want to see what my box will look like in the scene, so choose Render Preview. Right now we don't have any good lights set in the scene, just this basic light. Click over here and choose Environment Texture. Click on Open and open up the file from the reference folder, Studio Small. I don't want to see this image in the scene, I just want to get the lights out of it. So go over here, click on Film, and check Transparent. So now we're getting the lights from the environment texture, but we're not seeing it in the render. Hover your mouse here until you get this little plus sign or a cross. Click and drag to the left. Click here and choose Shader Editor. Press N to get rid of the side panel. Go into Materials and with the box selected, press New. This adds a material to our box. Here we can adjust the color, but since you already have the image texture for the box provided, you will just choose this. Change the render engine from Eevee to Cycles, and over here device to GPU compute. I usually set the viewport like this, uncheck this noise threshold, change the samples to 32 for viewport and 250 for render. Uncheck denoise for the render and check denoise for the viewport. So now we will unzoom here a little, hit Shift A, search, write in image, and click on image texture. Connect the color to the base color. Click on Open, and from the reference folder, choose Box Label 001. Now we will have to tell Blender how to map this image onto the box. So while in Edit mode, press A to select all the faces, U, and hit Unwrap. Hover your mouse here, click and drag out one more window. Change this one to UV Editor. If this image is not here automatically, click over here and choose Box Label. Now you should see the image in the background. Hit A to select all the vertices over here. S to scale it a bit and position it correctly onto the image. If I go into render view now, you can see our box is textured almost perfectly. I want to fine-tune each side separately. So by holding down Shift-Alt, I will select all the edges around here. Ctrl E and mark Seam. You should see this red line added along the edges. By separating one area with the seam, we can select it by pressing L while in Face Select. So if I choose Face Select and hit L while hovering above this side here, we should see that we only selected this side here. Click on these two arrows, and now you can move the map for this side as you wish. You see, wherever we move these vertices on the UV map, this is what we're seeing in the viewport. So make sure it's centered and do the same for the front as well. So by holding down Shift-Alt, I will select all the edges around here. Ctrl E, mark Seam. In Face Select, hover over here, press L, and you should select just the front faces. Now you can fine-tune these vertices here, make sure they're all inside the orange lines. The next thing I want to do is add some thickness to my box. So go over here to Modifiers, Add, Generate, and choose Solidify. This adds some thickness to our box. You can see if I hide this edge loop here and then press L while hovering above the top, I can hide it and we can clearly see the thickness of our box. Tap out of Edit View. Right now, our scale of the box is way off. It is almost 2 meters tall. To scale it correctly, I need to set the origin of our box object to the bottom. So go into Edit View, select the outer 4 vertices, hit Shift S and cursor to selected. This places our 3D cursor at the bottom of our box. Now right-click, set origin to 3D cursor. So the origin of the box is now at the bottom. If I scale it now, I scale it towards the bottom. We can see our scale is not 1, and we always want our scale to be 1, so hit Ctrl A and apply scale. You can see our scale is now 1. But I also want the location to be at 0 on all axes. So first, Shift S, cursor to world origin, and Shift S with the box selected, selection to cursor. This places our box at the center of the scene. Want to go into front view, and now I can delete these reference images because I don't need them anymore. Since we changed the scale, the thickness is now not correct. We need to adjust it in Solidify. If we go into edit mode and hide these vertices here, you can see our thickness is way off. We can disable Solidify by clicking on this icon here. And I want the thickness to be 0.1 centimeters. Or maybe 0.05. 0.04. And I think that's good. Now we will adjust the shape of the box a little. Select all of the vertices of this top panel and pull it up a bit. Go into front view. While in wireframe, pull them up a bit. Now deselect these outer ones and pull the middle ones up a little more, so we get this nice bend of the flap. Now we will add some more detail to the box. Add the Bevel modifier. Set the limit method to weight. Add in another modifier, generate subdivision surface. This adds extra geometry to our box. It makes it smooth and a bit curvy. With the box selected, go into Object and Shade Smooth. The next thing we will do is add some control objects that we will use to open and close our box. Add another collection inside box here, name it box 1, and add in another one and name it controls. Put the box in box, and we will add the control objects into the controls collection. Go into face select, Alt-Shift, and click alongside of these edges here to select all the faces around. Hit H to hide. We need to hide these flaps as well. So go into Vertices Select, L on both of them, and hide. Go into Edge Select and select all the edges around here with Shift-Alt. With all of them selected, here in Edges Data, mean bevel weight, type in 0.02. Add in a few more loop cuts here and here. Another one here. Alt-H to unhide everything. Select these faces around here again, hide them. We need to hide this edge as well, so we can choose these top vertices with L and adjust the flaps a little. Add in another loop cut and pull it in here and do the same on the other one. I want to add one more edge loop here. And now we're ready to add the controls. Hide all of these again. Select this edge, Shift S, cursor to selected, and add in empty plane axis. This empty object should be in the controls collection. If it's not, just drag it there. Select it and scale it down. These empty objects are not visible in the renders, but are often very useful for controls. And over here, I can actually change the shape of my empty object and set it to cube. Scale it to make it smaller, and then scale it on the x-axis so it goes along this edge that we want it to rotate on. Rename this empty to top closure panel. Now with all the vertices of the top selected, deselect the ones of this flap here, so that we have just the ones on top selected. And over here in the outliner, while you're still in edit mode, select this empty that you added. Hit space for search, and write hook to selected object. Go back to edit mode, select this middle front edge here, Shift S, cursor to selected. Now duplicate the empty, Shift S, selection to cursor. You can scale it down a bit and rename it to top tuck flap. Go back to edit mode, select these vertices here. In the outliner, select top tuck flap empty, space hook to selected. Now you can see this empty controls the tuck flap, and the top closure panel empty controls the rest of the top. What we need to do now is select this flap empty, hold down Shift, and select the other one. Hit Ctrl P, and choose Object Keep Transform. Now you parented the smaller empty to the bigger one. Now if I rotate this one, you can see they both move. When we animate the box opening, we will animate the rotation on both of them so this flap doesn't go through the box. Alt-H to unhide everything. Now select this first edge loop of the top, where it connects, hide it, L on the rest of the top, and hide it. We will add control empties to the flaps now. Select this edge, Shift-S, cursor to selected. Go over to controls in the outliner so that we add the empty there. We won't change the shape of these so that they are different. Scale it down and rename it to Dust Flap 01. Before parenting, I will add another loop cut here. In edit mode, select the vertices on this side. In the outliner, choose the dust flap, space hook to selected. And now if I hit R, Y, rotate along the Y axis, I can see it controls the flap perfectly. Do the same for the other side. Choose this edge, Shift-S, cursor to selected. Now we can just duplicate this one, Shift-D, Shift-S, selection to cursor. We can just rename it to Flap 02, select all the vertices, Dust Flap 02 in the outliner, space hook to selected. Now we can see they all work. Next, I will add an empty to control the whole box. Shift-A, empty, cube. Now you can see I added the empty to this edge of the flap, but if I just hit Alt-G, it brings the location of the box to 0 on all axes, so to the center of our scene. Now just go to front view with 1, scale the empty so it fits around our box. Our front flap empty needs to stay parented to this larger one, but all the other objects we want to parent to this biggest empty, to move along with the box. Select this first empty we added, hold down Shift, select the side empties, select this large empty the last, hit Ctrl P, Object Keep Transform. Now all of our objects are parented to this large empty. So right now, if I rotate the main control empty a little, switch the transformation orientation to normal, I can rotate and open the box correctly. Select the main control empty, Alt-R to reset the rotation. Rename the empty box control. Now let's work on the scene a bit. We will add a ground. Shift-A, add in a plane. Make sure it is flush with the bottom of the box. Click over here on Materials and choose New Material. Choose a slightly grayish color. Drag this metallic to 0.131. Bring the roughness down to get some nice reflections. And that's about it. Go into edit mode with the plane selected. Bring this back edge closer to the box. Hit EZ to extrude it upwards and bring it up. Select this edge here and hit Ctrl B. We want to bevel this edge. By scrolling on the mouse, I add more or fewer cuts. let's add in 9 segments and have this final line of the curve very close to the box. Add a few more loop cuts to straighten out the edges. Ctrl R and then bevel. Go out of edit mode. With the plane selected, go to Object and Shade Smooth. If we go into Render Preview now, it's actually starting to look good. Now we will start working on the bottle. Go into Front View, Wireframe. We can select this background and just hide it. Shift-A, Image, Background. Go into the reference folder and choose Bottle. Now our background image is much bigger than it should be, so scale it down so the bottle is approximately the right size. We want it to fit inside the box. Now we can just hide this box collection. Shift-A and add in a cylinder, mesh cylinder. Tap to go into edit mode, A to select everything, and then scale it down. Now it's difficult to see our cylinder with the background image as it is, so let's click over here, check opacity and bring the opacity down. Now we can see our cylinder more clearly. Select the cylinder. Now what we will do, select the cylinder, scale it a little, and now when we have it right along the label, hit Scale S, Shift Z. This will scale it on all the axes except the Z. So you will scale it along the x-axis and y proportionally, but not on the Z. It will stay the same height. Align it to the background image, choose these bottom vertices, extrude down, and scale. Just follow the outline of the bottle. When you get to the bottom, with this bottom circle face selected, hit I to inset it. Go back to front view, edit mode, select the top vertices and extrude up. Just follow the shape of the bottle. Add a loop cut here and scale. Add a loop cut anywhere you need more geometry. Select the top circle, inset it, and extrude up. While in front view, hit extrude and S. This will scale it. Extrude up, extrude and scale in. Now do this part approximately, because we don't really see the shape of the closed bottle. Somewhere like this is fine. Since we need a hole on the top, delete the top face. X, delete faces. I realized we need to add this edge here later, so select these two loop cuts and delete. Select the bottom and top vertices, Loop Tools, Bridge. Add a loop cut and slide it all the way to the top, and another one here. Now go to Modifiers, add Modifier, Solidify. This adds some thickness to our bottle. And that looks about right. When you're happy with the thickness, select this drop-down menu at Solidify and go to Apply. This will actually add the geometry and it's no longer a modifier. This applies the modifier. Go to Face Select, Alt-Shift and click on this edge here. Now to extrude this loop here correctly, hit E, S, Shift Z, which will extrude it and scale along the X and Y axis, but not on the Z. And now we added this edge. Add a few loop cuts here and here. And now add a bevel modifier. Change the limit method to weight and segments 2. Choose this top edge and write 0.02. Now if I select one of these edges, I can see the bevel weight. I can hover over it, press Ctrl C, which copies it. I don't need to click on it, just hover over it. Now select all of these edges that you want to bevel. With these selected, either hover here and press Ctrl V or write in 0.02. I will add a few more loop cuts here. Scale these two on the Z-axis. Add in another modifier, generate subdivision surface. And let's go to render preview. Go to materials and add a new material. I want just a hint of orange. Roughness 0.2 and change the IOR to 1.46. Over here in the subsurface settings, change the weight to 0.1 so we get some subsurface scattering. Shift A, add in a bump node, connect the normal to normal. Now I will add a noise texture. I will connect the color to height, bring up the scale to something like 317, and strength 0.1 so I get some of this fine texture on the bottle, but just a hint of it. So 0.01. Set the strength to 0.01. Now we need to add a cap. Select the bottle, choose this circle here, Shift D to duplicate it, and while it's still selected, press P. Tap out of edit mode with tab, and now you can see we have bottle and bottle 001. Rename bottle 001 to top. Select it and go to edit mode. Scale it and extrude it up. From the start, extrude it to the start of this texture here, of the holes in the cap. At the beginning, extrude it up till the end of it. Then keep extruding and scaling upwards. On the top, press F to add in a face. It adds a circular face. Hit I a couple of times to inset it. Go to wireframe. Make some fine adjustments if needed. You can add in more loop cuts with Ctrl R and scale it. Since we duplicated the geometry of the bottle to create the cap, or the top as we named it, it already has the same modifiers as the bottle. Here you can toggle it so it's visible or not visible in the viewport. Go to Object and Shade Smooth. Let's get rid of the Bevel modifier for now. Sometimes if your objects have a lot of subdivision surface, if you click here and go to Simplify, you can set the maximum number of subdivisions in the viewport and in the render. Let's select one for the viewport. Here in Modifiers, make sure you have one selected for viewport and render, and go to Apply. Now we have some more geometry to work with. I will bring the opacity up just to see these holes a bit better now. And what I want to do is get rid of these 3 edge loops here, which were added when we applied the subdivision surface modifier. X and delete edge loops. Go into wireframe. Make sure that these final edges align with the holes. Go to Face Select. While holding Shift Alt, click on one of these edges here to select all of them around. What we will do now is hit I and I again, so that we're insetting each face separately. Inset it about that much, and then inset it again. With all of these still selected, hit ES Shift Z to scale along the X and Y axis, but not on the Z axis. This will scale all of the holes towards the center, but not change the height. Now we can inset it again to sharpen the edge. And if we go to Render View, that doesn't look bad. We can add a loop cut here, slide it up, and another one slide it down. For now our top doesn't have any thickness, but let's set the material first. Since we duplicated the bottle's geometry, it has the same material applied. Over here, this number 2 means that there are 2 objects using this material now. With the cap selected, I can click on this number 2, which makes a separate material. Now I can rename it to top. Go over to base color and make it black. And get rid of the subsurface. If we turn on the box collection now, we can check if the bottle is inside the box. All's good. Let's add some thickness to the top. Select these vertices, ES, extrude and scale. Add some loop cuts to make the edges sharper. Select that one there. Hit 1 to go into front view and extrude up. Then just extrude and scale. We will not see this part, so it's not really important that it looks correct. If I select the cap and hit Ctrl I, it selects everything except the top. So now I can just hit H and hide everything else. Now I can clearly see what I'm doing and keep extruding and scaling just so I can close this off. Add another loop cut here. Face select all of the faces here, ES Shift Z, and bring it in. Save your file. Now the thread on this cap will not be visible, but a thread on the bottle should be visible. For this shot it doesn't need to be correct, but it's good that it's there. So let's duplicate this edge loop again. And rename it to threads. Go to edit mode, select all of the vertices, hit Shift S and cursor to selected. Go out of edit mode, right click, set origin to 3D cursor. Let's remove all the modifiers. Bring it up a bit. With it selected, press space for search, write in curve and choose Object Convert Curve. This will convert our mesh into a curve. You see it no longer has this triangle icon here, but a curve. If I go into edit mode now, we have a curve. Now we have these curve options, click here, and over in geometry, depth, we can add some thickness to it. Set it to something that looks correct. And now what we want to do is choose two of these points and hit P to separate it. Go out of edit mode and delete it. We don't need this little part. Now I will go into edit mode, hit 7 for top view, select one of these two, and extrude it just over the other one, but we don't want them connected. Go out of edit mode, bring everything down. Now back to edit mode, select one of these, and then turn off this proportional editing objects. It's supposed to turn blue. Make sure it is set to smooth and connected only. Now if I pull these up and scroll my mouse, you can see this circle, and that's the area that's getting affected. So as I pull this one up, I can scroll the mouse and control how many of these I want affected. Bring it up so it looks good. Now select the first and the last one and the ones closest to them. Hit space and subdivide. This subdivides these two segments separately. Go into top view and just adjust these two new vertices a bit so that they curve correctly. Now in edit mode, I will choose the first and the last vertice, set the pivot point to 3D cursor, and with the proportional editing objects option on, I will scale, Shift Z, bring this circle in so that we affect fewer vertices, and scale it enough so we get these ends inside our bottle's mesh. Add a subdivision surface modifier to this curve and shade it smooth. Save your file. Select this curve, hold down Shift, select box, press Ctrl L, and choose Link Materials. This will copy the material from the bottle to the curve. Now I want to add the label. Go into Edit mode, Face Select, select these edges which we already aligned to the label, Shift D, and hit P to separate it. Go out of Edit mode, go into Edit mode, turn off the proportional editing here, and over here choose median point for the transfer pivot point. Scale Shift Z. So again we're scaling on X and Y but not on the Z axis. Scale it enough so it's just around the bottle. 1 is front view, but hit Ctrl 1 to go into back view and select this rear edge. This is where we want our texture cut. Usually we add these seams in areas that are not visible. With this edge selected, hit Ctrl E and mark seam. Slide this to the left, U and unwrap. You can position the vertices to the center approximately. For now, the label is using the bottle's material, but just delete it and add in a new material. We will call this material bottle label. Add in an image texture, go to Open, navigate to the References folder, and find label bottle. Open image. Connect the color to base color. We can see it's there, but it's not mapped correctly. Now we can check something. Go over here and select face orientation. Whatever is blue is correct, meaning that the normals are facing outwards, but the cap right now is wrong. So select it, go into edit mode and hit Shift N. This fixes the normals. Everything should be blue. The red here, that's just the bottom and it's not important. We can see our label is correct. Deselect face orientation. Go to render preview. Over in the UV editor, select the label, edit mode, and unwrap it again. Rotate it until it's correct. You can press R90, which rotates it 90 degrees. If it's upside down, press R again and type in 180, which then makes it correct. We can scale this a bit, make sure it's centered, and that looks good. Now let's turn on the box, open it up with these controls. One thing that I see is not correct is that our box's interior also has the material as the outside of the box, and that shouldn't be like that. Although we will not see it, let's fix it. Select the box, Shift D to duplicate. This will duplicate everything. When we duplicate an object, the new one has the same modifiers as the original. Since we only want the inside, we can get rid of all of these hooks. Select this box 1, rename it to box inside, choose face select, hold down Shift Alt, and just click alongside these edges. So we select just these outer edges. With them selected, hit Ctrl I, which selects everything else, and hit X, delete vertices. Now we have just this part here. What we need to do now is with it selected, go to edit mode and scale it a little. S-Shift-Z so we're scaling on X and Y only. Bring it in a little. Fine, adjust it. We can check the normals, everything's blue so it's correct, but we still have this material. With inner part selected, click on this number 2 so we make it a single user for a new material, and name the material box inside. Get rid of the image texture, so remove the color from base color, and now it's white. That looks good enough. Edit mode, and we can pull these top vertices down a bit. One by one, hit Alt-R for each of these control empties to reset the rotation. Now let's organize the objects in our bottle collection. Make a new collection here. Bottle 1, we can delete this empty and move all of these objects into bottle 1. Hold down Shift, now select the label and the thread, and then click on the bottle, Ctrl P to parent, and object keep transform. So now our label and threads follow the bottle. Shift A, empty cube, add in an empty cube, place it around the bottle. Name this empty bottle control. Duplicate it. Change the name of this object to top control. Scale it. Set it around the cap. Now let's hold down Shift, select the cap, then the smaller empty, Ctrl P, object keep transform to parent the cap to the smaller empty. Then hold down Shift, select the smaller empty, the bottle. Finally click on the larger empty, Ctrl P, object keep transform. Now we parented the cap control and the bottle to this large bottle control. Now let's model the pill. Hide the box and the bottle. Select the pill collection, Shift A, image background, and add in this pill image. Shift A and add in a UV sphere. Before doing anything else, when you add an object, you can modify it by clicking here. Open this up, segments, change it to 8, rings, change it to 8. Go to edit mode, front view, and scale it so it fits our pill. In edit mode, select the top half, hit P, selection. Now we separated our sphere into two parts, the top and the bottom. In edit mode, extrude these vertices down. And extrude these up. Align them in the middle. In object mode, select one part, hold down Shift, select the second part, and Ctrl J to join. Now they're one object again. Select these two edge loops and either use Loop Tools Bridge, or you can just select these four vertices, hit F, add in a face, and then just select two on one side and keep hitting F, which adds faces along that line until it's closed up. We can check the face orientation, everything's blue, so it's good. Object and shade smooth. Add in some loop cuts. Select this middle loop cut here, Ctrl E and mark seam. So I want these pills to be white and blue. Add one material, keep it white but bring down the roughness. Add in another material, choose pill 1, but hit this number 2 so it makes it a new material. And choose blue. Nothing changes because for now our mesh is using only this material pill 1. Edit mode, in face select, hit L while hovering over the top, choose blue pill 2 and hit assign. Now we have two materials on one object. I can add some more loop cuts here. Add this detail here with a loop cut where it's a bit narrower. And our pill is more or less ready. We can just move it to the side and scale it down. Okay, here we need to get this right. We will use this original pill as the source object when we animate the pills going into the bottle. So for this particle system to work the same as this tutorial, you need to get the scale and size of this pill same as you see in this tutorial. Try to get it as close as possible. So first of all, scale it in object mode, not in edit mode, and get the scale to 1.832. Then go into edit mode and scale it down until you get the same dimensions as seen here, X, Y, and Z. You will need to go back and forth between edit and object mode so you get it to this size exactly in edit mode, so that our scale remains 1.832, but the dimension should be as close as possible to these. It doesn't have to be exactly the same. Since we were scaling in edit mode, the origin point is no longer where it should be. Select the pill, set origin, origin to geometry. Now our pill is ready. Now I can bring back my box and bottle, and I can see there's a little problem here on the bottom with some white coming through. I can select the box, go into edit mode, and just add two loop cuts all the way down here. This fixes the problem. In our reference images, we can see our colors are a bit more saturated. We can achieve this by going to the material node editor, pull this node back a little, Shift A, search, mix, add in a mix color node, not mix shader. If I pull it here, it gets connected automatically. So right now we're mixing our original image texture box label 001 with the color white by the factor of 0.5. I want to connect the same color to B and change it from mix to multiply. This makes my colors a lot more saturated. And play with the roughness until I like how it looks. We can also add a coat, which adds another layer of gloss, and we can adjust the roughness of this layer separately over here. I can do the same thing for the bottle. Pull this back, Shift A, mix color, connect it to both A and B, and change it from mix to multiply. Add the coat and bring the roughness up a bit. That looks good. Now I'm ready to add in my camera. Select the camera collection, hit Shift A and choose camera. The camera is added with some rotation already, so hit Alt R to reset the rotation to 0. Hit GY, pull the camera back a bit, hit 0 to go into camera view. With the camera selected, hit G, Z, and bring it up a little. Then press R, X to rotate on the X-axis, and set the rotation so we can see our bottle well. I want my camera to have some depth of field, meaning I want my box sharp and the background a bit blurred or out of focus. To achieve this, I will add an empty object, Shift A, empty sphere, scale it down, rename it to focus. With focus selected, go to Object Properties, and in Viewport Display, check this name option. Now we can see the name of this object in the viewport. Now I want to place the 3D cursor onto the box, hold down Shift and right click here. Now select Focus, Shift S, and choose Selection to Cursor. This places our focus object onto the 3D cursor or on the box. Now select the camera, go to Camera Settings, enable Depth of Field, and for the focus object, select Focus. Now we can play with the f-stop setting to get the desired look. Here in the outliner, create a new collection. I'll place it up here above Scene, rename it to Lights. Select this collection, Shift A, and add in Light Area. Now we can place our light somewhere here. This light is quite large, so scale it. Move it over here. You can just write these values in the location and rotation, or set it approximately here. Now if I press 0, go into camera view, I can toggle the light on and off to see how it affects our scene. I'll just move and rotate it a bit. That's about right. Go into top view with 7 on the numpad. Select this area light, Shift D to duplicate it, move and rotate it to get it onto the other side. With the world light and these two area lights, it's a bit too bright. So let's go over to world settings and bring the strength of this light to 0.35. Now go to render properties. And down here in color management, change the view transform to filmic and look high contrast. I'll bring this edge of our background down just a bit. Now I want to play with the material of this box a little. So select the box and go to the shader editor. Move these nodes closer together and pull the material output to the side. Add in a mix shader node. Place it here. It should connect automatically. Then select these 3 nodes here and Shift D to duplicate them. Pull them down. Connect it here to the mix shader. Add in a mix color node. Drop it here between the multiply and the principled BSDF. Now we're mixing our multiplied box label with the color white. Change the white into red. Shift A, add in a Fresnel node, just write FRE and it will pop up. Connect the factor to the factor of the mix shader. Change the IOR to 1.45. This gives us a slight red tint to the box's material when looking at it from an angle. It's a slight detail, but I think it looks good. We will play more with these nodes in future tutorials, but for now, just copy what you see here. Let's go back to color management and check Use Curves. When checked, we can adjust this line here. Somewhere here closer to the bottom, pull it down a bit, bend this curve a little in this direction, and closer to the top, bend it to the other direction. This gives us some nicer shadows. We want to get this curve into this slight S shape. You can see the difference it makes if we toggle it on and off. Whenever the models themselves are ready, save the file and then create a separate copy of the file you're going to keep working on. So now my models are ready and I will save a new file in which I will start animating. Now let's go to File, Save As, and save a new file, call it Step 001 Box Open, or whatever you think is appropriate. I like to name each file of an animation in numbered sequences, so it always makes sense. Although our final goal is to end up with a video file for our 3D animation, at this point we will render this sequence as images. So one image for each frame of the animation. Later we'll use Blender's video editor to export a video file from these image sequences. Click here on Output, choose a folder here. So in my original folder, I like to have a separate folder called Frames. Here create a new folder, call it Step 001 Box Open. I accidentally wrote Stio 001, but it doesn't matter. Once the folder's name is written, you can just select it, Ctrl-C, open up the folder, and Ctrl-V to paste it for the file name. Since we're rendering images, file format, PNG. Although it doesn't make a difference here, I want my frame rate at 30 frames per second. This will be important later in video editing. Right now, we just need to think about the fact that 1 second of our animation will be 30 frames, meaning 30 images. We need to render 30 images for 1 second of animation. We'll keep this resolution 1080p. Render properties, render engine cycles, device GPU compute, and I want to bring up the render samples to 350. Now we will start animating. I want the box to open while rotating and then the bottle to come out. To keep these collections organized, we can close up the ones we're not using and change the number of frames down here where it says end from 250 to 200. Here in the timeline, make sure this line is on frame 1. On frame 1, I want my box control to be at this location and this rotation. So I will hover my mouse over location and hit I. This will add a keyframe to X, Y, and Z locations for frame 1. Hover over rotation and hit I. All of our rotations will be 0 on frame 1. I want the box to stop rotating at frame 140, so move this line to frame 140. I can hover my mouse over the Z rotation, click and drag to the right. Set it to about 60 degrees and add a keyframe to both the rotation and location. Hover above rotation I. This adds a keyframe to the rotation. Hover above location, hit I. This adds another keyframe for the location. Now you can see if I move this line along, we can see our box rotates. It changes the rotation between frames 1 and 140. Now at frame 141, I want to duplicate these keyframes from frame 140 to frame 141. So I will select this yellow mark here, which represents the keyframes on the timeline, Shift D, same as with regular objects, and move it just 1 frame to the right to frame 141. Now I will animate the box opening. Make sure the pivot point is set to normal. Go to frame 1. Now we will animate only the rotation, not the location. On frame 1, hover above rotation for this object, hit I, then go to frame 50 and set the X rotation to 175. 176. hover above it, I, to add a keyframe. Now if we drag along the timeline here, we can see this top opens. We have the flap going through the box, so we will animate this rotation as well. Go to frame 1, add a keyframe, it should all be 0. Go to frame 10 and adjust the rotation so that it looks natural. Just animate the rotation on X. Add a keyframe. Okay. That's good. Go to frame 60 and rotate it back a bit so that it straightens out as it opens up. Add a keyframe. Go to frame 30. Add a keyframe for the rotation of these two side flaps, so they will start opening at frame 30. Add keyframes both of these rotations at frame 30. Then go to frame 100 and open them up. Add a keyframe. Add a keyframe to both. And now if I move this line from 30 to 100, we can see these flaps open up as well. Now we will animate the bottle coming out. Select the bottle control empty. On frame 80, add a keyframe to the original location. I want the bottle to be out of the box on frame 140, so go to frame 140, drag the bottle control empty up so that it's above the box, and add a keyframe to the location. I want the bottle to remain here until frame 152, so go to frame 152. You can just select this keyframe, Shift D, and pull it to the side all the way to 152. If there are no changes, we can either add a keyframe by hovering here and hitting I to either location, rotation, or scale, or we can copy an existing keyframe down in the timeline, select it, Shift D, and pull to the side. And if there are no changes, we get this orange line between the two keyframes, which are identical. I can see my camera is not positioned well because I want to see the whole bottle during this shot. Change the pivot point to global, select the camera, hit GY, and pull the camera back. You can see the location here, so you can just copy these locations in your file. Pull it back there. With the camera selected, hit R, X, which rotates it on the X-axis. Now, as this bottle goes down, I want the camera to zoom in on it. I will go to frame 152 and add a keyframe for the location and rotation of the camera. Now I'll just check how this looks. I don't want the box to remain visible, so go to frame 180 and pull it all the way to the right. And add a keyframe for the location and rotation. I can see the background is wider than it needs to be, so I will just scale it a bit on the X-axis to make it a bit narrower. Render preview looks good. I want the bottle to go back down on frame 200, so I will go to frame 200 here and pull it down. I can check from under that it's not going through our ground object. When you're happy with the location, add a keyframe to the location. As the bottle goes down, I want the cap to twist off. So I will select the cap control, and on frame 120, add a keyframe to the location and rotation. Sometimes we get these artifacts, usually when there are two planes in the same location. Here they're not really touching, but even if they're really close, this can still happen. Now we can just select the label and hide it so it doesn't confuse us, but actually there will be no issues. This is just a glitch. Then go to frame 150, pull it up slightly, approximately where you want it to stop rotating. Set the rotation on the Z axis to 284 or something close. something that looks good. Add a keyframe to the location and rotation. And since we changed the location and rotation, our cap is twisting off. I want the cap to remain here for just a bit, so I will copy this keyframe from 150 to 152. So for 3 frames, it will remain in the same location with the same rotation. Go to frame 180 and pull it all the way up. Add a keyframe to the location. Then you can add another keyframe to frame 200 and just pull it all the way up so it doesn't give us any shadow or... Since I wanted the camera to zoom in on the box as it goes down, I will go to frame 200, adjust the rotation and location to something that looks good. Add a keyframe to the location and rotation of the camera, and then we get a nice zoom in onto the bottle as it lands down. We set the output folder, we adjusted everything else. Now let's do a test render. Go to Render, Render Image. You can see we have some grain, meaning we can either bring the samples up or use a denoiser. Let's use a denoiser, because bringing the samples up also increases the render time. Select Denoise, Albedo and Normal, Accurate, Quality High, and use GPU if your system supports it. I'll bring the samples up to 550 actually, and do another test render. With the denoiser, you can potentially leave the samples lower. But even with the higher samples, it's only 9 seconds per frame, so I'll stick with this. Another thing I want animated is the focus. So on frame 1, I want the focus to be here on the box. So I will add a keyframe to the location, hover here, hit I. Go to frame 80, add a keyframe while it's in the same location. We get this orange line because there are no changes. Go to frame 100, shift and right click onto the cap. Shift S, selection to cursor, and add a keyframe for this location here. This places our focus onto the cap on frame 100. Then go to frame 140, shift right click to place the cursor here onto the bottle. Select the focus, shift S, selection to cursor. Add a keyframe to this location. And I want the focus to remain here until frame 165. So just select this, duplicate it, and drag it over to 165. Then go to frame 200, shift right click onto the bottle. Here, select focus, shift S, selection to cursor, and add a keyframe so the focus is on the bottle on the last frame. Let's do a test render on frame 200, and that looks good. Now let's do some quick compositing. Go to this compositing tab, check use nodes, pull these nodes apart a little so we have space. Add in a viewer node. Now holding down Shift, right-click and pull down across this line. This gives us an extra circle, which is a connection point. Connect this circle to the viewer node, and now we can see our image in the background. With the viewer node selected, hit N to get this side menu, go to View, and click on Fit. Now we see the whole image. We'll add another node, Shift A, Lens Distortion, place it here, set the distortion to 0.05, make sure Fit is selected, and dispersion to 0.05 as well. And let's do another test render. Now we get some of this lens distortion in our image, maybe a bit too much, but let's just keep it as it is. To make our render slightly faster, go over to Render Properties, Performance, and check this Persistent Data. This will make our renders a bit faster. If the renders are taking too long, you can do a % of the 1080p size, so you can just bring this down to 50% if you want faster renders. If you want to keep it like this, just hit Render Animation. And this will render each frame one by one and save the image files in your output folder. That's it for this part. Now we can see our render finished and all our frames are here. Let's save our file and then go to Save As, Step 2, Pills. Save. We will use this file to animate the pills going into the bottle. For this animation, I want all the pills to go into the bottle, and as the last one goes in, the cap should come down and twist back on. Now there are different ways to achieve this, and we could make the pills go into the bottle, but in 3D animation sometimes we have to cheat. Sometimes we need to find an easier way to get things done. So my idea here is to animate the pills going out, and then we will reverse the frames in video editing and make it look like they're going in. So we will render the animation of pills coming out of the bottle, and in the final edit, we will make the pills go back into the bottle, just by reversing the frames in video editing. Now we will set up this scene so that the pills go out of the bottle. Since the last shot is going to be the cap twisting back on, and we are animating in reverse, we will start with the cap twisting off. We have all these original keyframes from part 1, and I'm just interested in these keyframes for the cap. Everything should remain in the same location on frame 200 except the cap. So what I will do is go past frame 200, select everything, but deselect the cap and the cap's control object. I will go down here, hit A to select all the keyframes and delete. Once I delete all these keyframes, everything will remain the same as it was on the last keyframe added, so as it was on frame 200. The only keyframes that are left now are the keyframes of the top. You can see if I pull the line along the timeline, just the cap is moving. Everything else remains the same as it was on the original frame 200. Since all the motion is gone, we can go back to frame 1. Go down to timeline, hit A to select all of the cap's controls keyframes and pull them to the side so that the first keyframe is on frame 1. Originally, in the first part, our cap took 30 frames to twist off, but now I want it to move a bit slower. So over here in the timeline, select all the keyframes except the one on frame 1 and pull it to the side. Get this first next keyframe onto frame 60. This means that our cap's rotation will take 2 seconds or 60 frames. Let's delete this double frame here, just select it an X. This next keyframe, place it on frame 120, and we will adjust it a little. With the cap selected, just hit GZ, pull it down, and place it just above the camera's view, so it's just off screen. Add a keyframe to this location on frame 120, and this one on 140 can remain the same. Actually, let's double this keyframe on 120, just so our motion is nicer. We will set a new output folder to output. Although this one is named Steo, I'll create a new folder and name it Step 002 Pills. Select it, copy, and then copy the name of the folder into the file name and accept. Save your file. Now we will animate the pills coming out of the bottle. Select the bottle, go to Edit Mode, Face Select, Shift-Alt, select these faces here, Shift-S, cursor to selected. We need the cursor here, go to Pill, add in a new collection, Pill Emitter. We will add an object from which the pills will come out of, and a new one, Pills. Drag this sphere into Pills and rename it to Pill. That's our original pill. You can see the scale and dimensions here with the origin at the center of our object. Select the Pill Emitter collection, Shift-A, Mesh, and add in an icosphere. Keep the subdivisions at 2 and scale it down. Get it to approximately the same size as you see here. Go to Camera View and pull it down so that the icosphere is not visible. Go to Top View, make sure it's centered. Now we will add a particle system to this icosphere, and the particles will be our pill. Select the icosphere, go to Particle Properties, and click on this plus to add a particle system. Initially we get something that looks like this. Scroll down here. Let's close all of these up so we don't get confused, and open the render settings, render as, change it from halo to object. Now everything disappears until we select the render object. Over here in instance object, select this and then just click on the pill. Now we're getting the pill as our particle system object. We can adjust the scale here, set it to 0.5, go up, set the number to 60. Now I want the pills to start coming out at frame 60. So frame start set to 60, end 240, and lifetime type in 350. With icosphere selected, in the particle settings, go over to velocity, change it to 0.002, scroll down, field weights, gravity minus 0.002. This reverses the direction of our gravity because it's negative. Now the pills are going up, but they're going up straight. Here we can choose if we want the emitter, in our case the icosphere, visible or not. We don't need this visible, although it's hidden. Check this rotation option, open up these settings. Let's give it a random rotation of 0.26, phase 0.36, and randomize phase 0.21. Now we can see they're no longer straight. Add in a subdivision to the icosphere. Here in Modifier Properties, click on these lines here at the edge and pull the subdivision modifier above the particle system. For the particle system to take the subdivision into consideration, subdivision has to be above it. Over here, if I click on this screen, I can hide the particles. Sometimes if there are too many, they can overload your system and slow it down a bit. To get more dynamic motion, I can add some rotation to the icosphere, go to frame 60, add a keyframe to the rotation of the icosphere on frame 60, then go to frame 240, set the Z rotation to 900, and add in another keyframe. Now we get this nice rotation. With icosphere selected, in the particle settings, in source, change it from faces to volume. Use modifier stack so that the subdivision surface is taken into account for the particle settings. Distribution random. But we want the pill motion to be more dynamic. We want them to come in from different sides. We will achieve this by adding a force which will affect the pills. Go over to the pills collection, new collection, force. With it selected and the 3D cursor in the same location, add in a force field, Shift-A, force field, and add in a vortex. Bring it down slightly. You can see the location here. Click here. Let's see what it looks like now. You need to play it from the beginning, so go to frame 1 and play. Okay, we need to change one more thing for it to work properly. Over here in Force Settings, go to Shape and change it from Plane to Point. Now it works as it should. You can see the vortex force field is affecting the motion of our pills, and that looks good. Once I'm happy with the motion, select the icosphere, go over here where it says Cache, and hit Bake. Once you bake it, this motion is saved. If I'm not happy with anything, I can delete the bake, make some changes. For example, let's change the seed. This just gives us a random original position of the pills. Bake again. And it looks good. And by pulling the line in reverse, we can see what it will look like in the final. The output folder is set, so we can just render animation. When the render is complete, save the file, and then go to File, New, and select Video Editing. This is Blender's video editor. Let's just pull this to the side so we have just the preview and the sequencer. Bring this down a bit. First of all, change the frame rate to 30. Go down to the sequencer, Add, Image Sequence, navigate to Step 1, Steo1 for me. Click on the first file, hit A. This adds all the images as a single strip into the sequencer. You can see if I pull the line left or right, it looks good. By default, we don't have enough frames for our whole animation, so extend the end frame. Go to the first empty frame, that's frame 201. Add, Image Sequence, navigate to Step 2, Pills, select the first one, hit A, add Image Strip. Now this looks wrong, but it's not. We animated the cap going off, but the plan was to reverse the frames. So with this strip selected, go to the side menu, and in Video, check Reverse Frames. Now you can see we get a perfect transition and our pills coming into the bottle at the end and the cap coming down to close. Navigate here to the last frame. With this strip selected, go to Add, Image Sequence, and add frame 1 because that is our last frame since we reversed the strip. I want the last frame to be still, so it's just an image. Extend it a little. And let's say I'm not happy with the speed of this. I want the pills to go in slightly faster. I can select this strip, go to Add, Effect Strip, Speed Control. Over here, I can either keep it on stretch and adjust the size of this strip in the sequencer, but I want to change it to multiply and write in 2, which just makes it twice as fast. It multiplies the speed by 2. Exactly in the middle, it is at the last frame. So I can just bring this still frame up here, so it's on top. Then to clean this up a little, in the sequencer, I can select these two strips, select the one, Shift, select the other, Control G, this groups them, and I can just see where it ends, right there. Select the strip, hit K, this cuts it, and X, delete this part here. Bring this strip up, go to the first frame of this strip, under it add in a color, add color. By default it adds a black color, and that's what we need. Extend it. Then over here on frame 380, select this strip, which is just the final still frame. In the side menu, go up here to Compositing, set the opacity to 1, click on this little circle here to add a keyframe for the opacity. Go to frame 410. Wherever we write numbers in Blender, we can just add a certain amount. So here next to 380, just write plus 30, and that's 410. Enter. Bring the opacity to 0, add a keyframe, and now we have a nice fade out to black at the end. You can hover your mouse above this 410, hit Ctrl C, just while hovering, you don't have to click, and then hover above, end, and Ctrl V. This will paste the number. So the end frame is 410. Save your file. Pills Video 001. Save as. Now go to Output, navigate to the folder where you want to export your animation. I will go to my Pills tutorial folder, create new folder, call it Preview, and name the file Pills V001. Go to File Format. Here we can choose the format of the video file we want to output. Keep everything as is. We can change the output quality to perceptually lossless, which is good for previews. If I'm doing a final, I would choose lossless, which makes it a larger file. Right now, perceptually lossless is good enough. Once everything is ready, save your file, and then go to Render Animation. Once it's done, try running your video file, and everything should work perfectly. Congratulations on making it this far. You've learned a lot, but this is just the beginning. Now it's time to put your skills into practice. Try creating something new on your own, and then revisit this tutorial to reinforce what you've learned. Repeating tutorials after some solo practice is one of the best ways to solidify your skills. Remember, don't rely just on tutorials and don't get stuck on them. Your growth lies in personal projects that challenge your creativity and problem solving. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please like and subscribe to stay up to date on new content. I'd love to see what you create. Share your results via email or on Puzzle Block's social media pages. Thank you for watching. Keep creating.